Go for it.
Hey, this is Warren Redlick. Thank you for watching. Thank you for waiting. If you've been in the waiting area, I'm here with Will Bradbury from the Boring Revolution channel. There's a link to his channel in the description below. We have great news today, or I think it comes from yesterday, really. This is from Vital Vegas. Vital Vegas published an article that said, confirmed critics of Elon Musk's Vegas loop are clueless. That relates to this tweet from Steve Hill, from the Las Vegas Convention Center Authority, who said, congratulations, Boring Company. Las Vegas Convention Center Authority loop capacity testing exceeded 4,400 passengers per hour on Tuesday, confirmed today after reviewing results. That was May 29, 2021. I guess that was today. It must have been, oh, it was just after midnight, probably nighttime in Las Vegas when he said it. Elon Musk replied, Vegas for the win. And there's this Vital Vegas article that I put the headline on before, said the capacity goal is about 4,400 people per hour. But from what we've seen, in addition to some math, it's likely to be closer to 7,000 people per hour. And there are larger vehicles being developed by Tesla that can accommodate 12 passengers. Construction of the Vegas loop cost $52.5 million. Fun fact, New York City's 2nd Avenue subway cost $2.5 billion a mile with a B. So great news for the Boring Company. Great news for Las Vegas, frankly. So before I get into that other guy that we're going to talk about, Will, what are your thoughts on these results? Were you surprised? Is there anything in this that I missed? What do you think?
Well, I must admit, I was a little bit surprised that they met the target this week. I thought they were going to fall slightly short, but they always had the bays there to hit the target. And it looks like on the videos that I've had a look at on YouTube, various people have kind of broadcast their kind of experience using the loop. Very, very positive feedbacks there. They were getting in and out of the vehicles very quickly. There was staff there helping them, advising them, telling them to keep the doors open. They managed to get that down. I believe they've got it below 25 seconds per vehicle, maybe well below that in some other cases. And they've smashed it, absolutely smashed it. And it's absolutely incredible day for the Boring Company. It's the first project they've ever done. Smashed the targets. You know, we said from day one that they wanted to achieve 4,400. They've got slightly over that. I'm seeing tweets from the Boring Company saying they've got this V4, which is the next kind of version or kind of setup for the system in Las Vegas. They're going to get that up to 5,050, and that's with existing Tesla vehicles. This has made me even more bullish on the Boring Company. Extremely, extremely excited. It was great to see Steve Hill talking about this. The first thing that I seen this morning is actually, I woke up, I picked up my phone. I seen a tweet from you, Warren. I picked it up. I thought, oh my days, this is incredible. Woke up, massive smile on my face. I've just been going at it all day. It's absolutely incredible. The one thing that kind of disappoints me, though, I must admit, I've not heard anyone praise the main kind of man, Bill Davis, on this one. I think
Steve Davis. Steve Davis, right?
Sorry, Steve Davis. Yeah, Steve Davis. Steve Davis has not really been mentioned that much, and I think Steve Davis is kind of the main architect of this success. Obviously, there's other people that have played a big part, but he deserves a lot of credit. Like I say, it's a great day for the Boring Company. Very, very, very proud of them.
Sorry about that. I just realized I didn't have my headphones on.
Cool.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, hang on. All right, I think that should be good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, so overall, this is great news for the Boring Company. We'll talk about the future of the Boring Company next. I just want to dive into this because a lot of people are mentioning it in the chat. I've had an ongoing exchange, and Will has been a part of this exchange with a character on YouTube named Thunderfoot. And this is one highlight of the exchange. I don't know if you guys can read that. It's probably hard to read on a phone. Thunderfoot, I called out Thunderfoot because Thunderfoot has multiple videos saying that the Vegas loop isn't going to work. And in his videos, he's basically saying it will only have capacity for 1,000 people an hour. And he's now trying to weasel his way out of it. So he said in this tweet at the top, he said, It's almost exactly the same number I estimated as the maximum carrying capacity for the system in my latest video. And then he says, in terms of flux, it's about 10 times lower than a subway. I said, well, what's the time code in the video where you estimate the maximum carrying capacity of the system? Here's the thing. He never said that it would achieve 7,000 passengers an hour. He never said it would achieve 4,400 passengers an hour. He repeatedly said 1,000 or maybe 1,250 an hour or 1,200 an hour, depending on what it was. So I asked him, what's the time code? He said, are you really stupid or just trolling? I asked the same exact question again. What's the time code in the video? He says, just trolling. I said, it's a simple question in response to your lie above. What's the time code of the video? He is lying. This guy is let me just, I want to say this about Thunderfoot. Okay, there's a lot of people who like his channel. He has nearly 1 million subscribers. So in a sense, he has achieved success on YouTube that both Will and I would love to have, right? We would love to have 1 million subscribers.
Absolutely.
I think that he has achieved that success largely by choosing easy targets to mock and by going over the top, having a very mocking tone. Like he's more of an entertainer than an informer. It's easy to pick on creationists. It's easy to have an audience of males and pick on feminists. I might agree with Thunderfoot on those topics, but I don't pander to an audience by talking about, using sexualized pictures of women. Well, I have used sexualized pictures of women. Have to admit that.
Yeah.
But I don't pander to the audience and attack feminists, which is something that the incel audience that he has loves attacking, loves criticizing strong women. But he about 4 or 5 years ago, he decided to turn his sights on Elon Musk, and he picked on Falcon 9. And he basically said that the reuse of the rocket booster was a stupid idea. Now, he's denying that he said it was stupid when it's very clear from his tone, it's very clear from his words, it's very clear that he thought this was a bad idea. And it's very clear to anybody watching SpaceX that it's a very good idea. Today, looking at, would you agree with me on that, Will? I'm assuming you agree with me on that.
I just find the example he uses. I'm no expert on rockets, but I believe the system that he keeps quoting never actually put anyone in orbit, and never even put an object in orbit. Is that correct? It's not like he's referring back to some kind of system that was very effective or even operated for long periods of time.
Well, he talks about the space shuttle. He talks about other rocket systems, but he doesn't come to grips with the fact that today, the year 2020, let's say, or the year 2021, Falcon 9 is dominating the launch, whatever you call it. It's dominating launch. It is the go-to choice. If you want to launch something, a payload into space, 9 times out of 10, you're going to choose Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is doing more launches, and then by payload mass, it's doing even more. It has a huge share of the market for launches to orbit. It is the first American launch provider to launch humans to space or to the space station since the last shuttle, which is way more than 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. We've been relying on Russians to get American astronauts to the space station, and now SpaceX is doing it in more comfort, on a better vehicle, more reliable. It's doing fantastic. So he's completely wrong about Falcon 9. He denies that he's wrong about that. He's completely wrong about... He's trying to make up some story. Dr. Know-It-All,
yes,
he did a great video attacking Thunderfoot for his more recent video saying that Falcon 9 isn't cheap, as they're saying. Look, SpaceX is launching its own payloads, its own Starlink payloads on Falcon 9, and it's using reused boosters, and it is succeeding, and it is succeeding, and it is succeeding. It's not even a close call. And this is the striking thing. If you watch Thunderfoot at all, he has this tendency in his videos to use this clip where the guy says, "I'm infallible," to suggest that he's infallible. He's very clearly wrong about Falcon 9. He's now very clearly wrong about the Boring Company and Vegas Loop. So yeah, I'm calling him Thunder Idiot. I think, but you got to put a 0 in place of the O in idiot.
He is literally a YouTube bully. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And what he does, what upsets me is that he keeps going after people again and again and again. Like a good example of that is solar roadways. Now, I'm not saying it's a great idea, but the way he goes after them, and also he pulls along his little army of idiots as well who go and attack people. Some good friends of mine, G. Schwen and Sebastian, have had
Yes.
major problems with idiots going onto their YouTube channel, giving them abuse and things like that. They've done some debunk videos, and he basically hit them with three videos. He's not a nice person. He's not a
No,
nice person.
he's coming for me too. I think he's coming
Yeah.
for me. He
Yeah.
sorry, Caleb King. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Caleb right. Says, wasn't this successful test done with the system really hamstrung? Speed limits, limited cars and tunnels, etc. What are some ways the unhampered system will be even better? Will, I'm going to let you answer that question.
Absolutely. So there's no stagnation here. There's constant improvement. This system is going to improve rapidly over the next 6 to 12 months. So we're going to see the gradual increase of speeds as they move into more of a full self-driving kind of system with no drivers. That's going to increase the capacity. We're going to see vehicles driving closer together at high speeds, and also in the very kind of medium to long term, we're going to see the Boring Company autonomous electric vehicle or minibus. Now, in the most recent earnings call that Tesla did, someone did ask a question about this. Elon Musk brushed it off. I think what he said was, what did he say? We have nothing to share at this moment in time. I don't know if that is literally being very truthful or he doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know, but that would have massive implications on the capacity of this system. Potentially, we could see this system in Las Vegas, this very small system, which is kind of limited because you can't accelerate and deaccelerate that much in there. It's only 0.83 miles.
Right.
Potentially, we could see that moving maybe around 10,000 at some point. I've heard a lot of numbers thrown around. I think they're viable. I think it was Phil Harrison who did a very good simulator on this. He was getting around 8,000. So I think it's all possible. At the moment, it's limited by speed. That's going to increase. We know that the gaps between vehicles, obviously, that as we get rid of drivers, that's going to come down, and also the efficiency of people moving in and around the station is also going to increase. So it's only going to go up from here. They mentioned in the tweet that they've got this V4 where they're potentially going to increase it up to 5,050 per passengers per hour. That is incredible. That's well above the 4,400. So all in all, this is a great day. This is a great day for the Boring Company. Everything's been proved out. In Las Vegas, the actual main Las Vegas system that's going to run down the strip, they're talking about what is it now? 55,000 passengers per hour. That's 27,500 in each direction. That is a big number. That's getting close to kind of Crossrail kind of numbers. Crossrail is the big rail scheme in London that cost, I believe it was around 14 billion pounds and finished 4 years late. It's getting close to that, just slightly below that. So these are big numbers. I think they can do it. Is it going to be easy going? No. Are they going to struggle to get there? Possibly along the way, but they will get there because that's what Elon Musk always does. He always innovates. He always gets there in the end.
Yeah, I think I would just respond to the plain and simple thing is, if at some point they're able to speed up the cars. Right now, I think the cars are mostly limited to 30 miles per hour. I think in some sections they may be able to go faster, but once they're able to speed up the cars, that will help a little bit with throughput. If they get to the point, I think we're expecting, and Will, you can comment on this. I'd probably be more interested in your comments than mine. There's a lot of talk that they would change to 12 passenger vehicles or I think 16 passenger vehicles are possible.
Yeah.
If you design that right, like if you have you need more. To me, you like a 4-passenger vehicle with 4 doors makes it really easy to get in and out quickly. It is potentially. Well, let me ask you this question. Thunderfoot's take on it is that the ingress and egress of the vehicles in the bays and the stations is sort of a limiting factor on the throughput of the system. So I think that's probably true to an extent, that you're always as weak as your weakest link, and if you don't have good in other words, if let's say you have a lot of old elderly people or disabled people using the system, they're probably going to be slower getting in and out of cars. It depends on but usually when you have conventions in this convention center, I don't think you're always going to have some elderly and disabled people, but the proportion will be fairly small. People who are unable to do this. And so that shouldn't be that much of a problem for the system. But if you design the 12 passenger vehicles wrong and it makes it harder to get in and out. That could, in theory, slow down the changeover more than you gain by having 12 passengers, or is that not really correct?
I think, yeah, that's somewhat correct. I think that if you have a bigger vehicle with more seats in it, the egress and ingress of people is going to increase the time it spends at the station slightly, but not excessively. I think the key metric is the distance between the door and the furthest seat from the door. If they can keep that to a minimum, so if they can keep the vehicle less than 20 foot long, maybe even less than 19 foot long, there's a lot of room in an electric vehicle. When you get rid of the engine and the boot, there's an incredible amount of room in there. You can fit a lot of seats. I believe once they do that, it will only slightly increase the amount of time they spend at the station, and then they can obviously egress from the station quicker. I think that is the key for the Boeing company. Once they have that vehicle that holds 12 to 16 people, that massively increases the capacity. At the moment, they're moving 3 passengers in a vehicle, and they've got a driver. Once you get rid of that driver and add an extra passenger, that's also a big increase. Once you can add, another 8
Oh
passengers
yeah.
potentially, that again, that's a big increase. That's
Well, yeah.
like
Let's
200%.
just address that really simple one. Right now, it's a driver and I think 3 passenger maximum in the vehicles. Maybe a fourth one in the back. Maybe it's 3 in the back seat, but it's probably a driver and 3 passengers. If you
Yeah,
go to self-driving cars, then you go to 4 passengers,
mm,
and you just increase the capacity by 33%.
yeah, 33. Yeah,
Right. And then,
yeah,
so my picture of the 12 passenger or 16 passenger vehicle, one version is you build it on a Model 3 platform or a Model X platform. So it's longer. The Model X platform's a little wider. I don't think you need that necessarily. If you did, my picture is you use a Cybertruck platform. And
yeah,
Elon specifically said to Joe Rogan that he had to make Cybertruck narrower so it would fit in the tunnel. Well, why does Cybertruck have to fit in the tunnel? I don't think Cybertruck's going to be doing a lot of robotaxi passenger work in the tunnels. That's, one theory is, well, we expect to be doing a lot of, pickup truck type work in the tunnels, carrying cargo in the bed of the truck. But I think it's more likely that the chassis for Cybertruck would be an excellent chassis for a minibus that could hold 16 or even 20 people or more in some countries. Some countries, they pack people in tighter, right?
absolutely.
So, a Cybertruck being 200 and, let's say, 20 inches long, which is that's like 5 meters. Is that
Uh,
5 meters? About five
Around
meters.
5 meters. Yeah,
So you might be able to get 6 rows with 1 passenger on each side, or 3 passengers. Let's say you could get 18 people in there. I
mm,
don't know if you would do 5 rows and 3 passengers. I don't think, and Cybertruck is wider, so it would definitely make sense to have 3 passengers wide. And I think one of the issues there is, can you design it? It's not Cybertrucking, man. It's a boxy thing that's based on the Cybertruck platform. So the whole length of that bed is room for more seats, and
yeah,
the front is room for more seats. So you get a lot more people in there, and maybe you have 2 really wide doors on either side. Well,
yeah. That's absolutely key. Is that you have the big doors. At least you want them at least maybe 5.5, 6 foot wide. 2 double doors. That allows obviously people in wheelchairs as well to get in. So some vehicles you'd want to be accessible to wheelchairs, so you might have less seats in there, and they'd be able to hail that via the app as well. So you'd be able to accommodate them. But most vehicles, like you say, you could maybe get 4, maybe 5 rows of seats in there. Quite a lot of leg room. It'd be quite easy. Like I say, it would just literally be a box. Um,
I think
be
five
around
by
like,
three, 5 by 3
yeah,
could make a lot of sense.
yeah, yeah,
And maybe
absolutely.
maybe you could squeeze 6 by 3, and I don't know. By the way, Jessica Kirsch asks, does anyone know if a Cybertruck pulling a trailer will be capable of using the tunnel? I think the answer is yes, especially if they make it a little narrower. Might be a little tight. Will would know more about this than I do. Will, what do you think?
So you can actually fit a lot in the tunnel. One of the ways you could do that is just by slightly increasing the height of the road deck. If you increase the height of the road deck by maybe say around 6 inches or about 150 mil, that would give you a lot more room on either side as well. So you could do that. There's a lot of room above. I don't know if you've seen the Jay
Yeah.
Leno video where he takes the Cybertruck into the truck.
Yes.
into the tunnel. Sorry, there's a lot of room above the truck, so you could raise that road deck. Any kind of you could have a concrete road deck, and you could have like a void in the middle of the road deck, and use exactly the same amount of concrete as they are doing now. So it's not a cost issue. So you could easily definitely get a Cybertruck in there, definitely any kind of vehicle. I don't think you could fit a Tesla semi truck. I think that'd be too
No,
tall.
no.
But every other vehicle that Tesla makes, I think you could pretty much get in there quite easy.
I think semi
Yeah,
might also be too wide. Dave White asks, how is it cheaper than a subway? And I want to address an effectiveness
yeah,
point about regular mass transit systems. So Thunderfoot keeps talking about a bendy bus, which I think in America we call an accordion bus. In Canada they call an articulated bus. It's a two-section bus with a flexible piece in the middle that allows one driver to drive a longer bus. And he described it in his video as carrying 100 passengers, and somehow they're able to get in and out of two or three doors in a minute. But four people in a four-door car can't get out of a car in the same 1 minute. Kind of ridiculous. But the really important distinction is when you have smaller vehicles in a system like the boring system, you're going from station A to station C. You don't have to stop at station B. If you're in a 100 passenger vehicle, it has to make every stop. You can have express vehicles as well, but a lot of the vehicles are going to be stopping at every stop. You think
mm.
about where the Vegas system is going, it's going to be 30 miles. Is it going to be 46 stops? Is that the number you've seen, Will?
Yeah. That sounds about right. There's a lot of stops at the Caesars Caesars Casino. But it's at 46 sounds about right.
So you can
Um,
imagine if you were going from one end of the system to the other,
yeah,
and you had to stop 40 times, versus you can go from just your stop to the where you start to where you're going without having to stop at all those places, and you're able to go.
yeah.
Even if you're limited to 30 miles an hour, that's going to be so much faster than making all those stops, and that's a huge difference from a subway
Well,
system or a bus.
absolutely. And what I would add to that as well is initially this system might roll out with stations, and those stations are still going to be high throughput. You're going to get 55,000 people potentially in this system per hour. At some point in time, I anticipate that we will have vehicles driving out of the system and then
Yes.
actually taking you close to your house or maybe actually to your house. Depends how much you want to pay, and that will really open the capacity up because you don't need a bay for each vehicle. You can just essentially tell it you want it to go here. It'll pick you up there. It'll take you into the system, and then it'll take you to where you need to go. So the end goal is to kind of merge the Boeing company system with the robo taxi system. They might initially start off as separate systems. I don't know what your opinion on that is, Warren, but I think in the long term they will kind of merge into one, maybe with the same vehicle types.
Right. No, I think it's very clear in the
Yeah.
planning. I don't know. I think you've watched some of this. There's been some city council meetings where Steve Davis spoke to city council members or commission
Mm.
members or county members, and there was this one particular member of like a county commission who was talking about how his commute currently was 30 minutes, and this system was going to reduce his commute to 7 minutes. And to me, that means he's planning on having a Tesla that's driving him through the tunnel to get him to where he wants to go. That wasn't, and it could just be a robo taxi comes and picks you up. I think there's different ways of looking at this system. One way is it's a self-contained system. The only vehicles in the system stay in the system and don't go out on public roads.
Yeah.
And that, the Teslas, maybe the 12 passenger vehicles will not be designed to go on roads and they'll stay entirely in the system, or the 12 or 15 passenger vehicles. But the Model 3s, Model X's, Model Ys, whatever, there's no reason they wouldn't be able to go out onto public roads. And I think ultimately we're going to see stations that are designed for vehicles to exit and enter. And so in a robotaxi world, the robotaxi comes and picks you up and drops you off at your home. Picks you up
So
at your home, drops you off where you want to go, then goes on and gets another ride. Becomes a very, very efficient system. One of Thunderfoot's other criticisms of the concept of boring company tunnels is that you get all these vehicles coming into city center. Where are they going to park? Well, we already have that problem. We already
yeah.
deal with that problem. But in a robotaxi world, they don't stay. They go and pick up their next ride. Either they pick up a ride there and take them somewhere else, or they go somewhere else and pick up a new ride and bring them in. And you end up using a lot less parking in the city center because of the robotaxi system that Thunderfoot doesn't seem to understand.
Yeah, yeah. You might even have excess road capacity, and you could just have a slow lane. It's just essentially circling around the city. There's hundreds of ways to deal with these kinds of issues. Another thing that he said as well that I noticed on one of his videos was that the Boeing company would need slipways, so like entry and exit ramps that are at least 1 kilometer long. I have no idea how he's come to that number.
All right.
1,000 meters.
I missed that one.
1,000 meters. So it's like I just thinking, how quickly could I get up to 100 miles per hour in my current car, which is not exactly the fastest thing in the world, and I probably could do it in just over 400 meters, maybe slightly less than that. And I think he's just pulling numbers out of thin air. But one of his absolutely best ones that is absolutely ridiculous is he pulled over a plan of the Las Vegas Convention Center loop system, and then pointed to the corner between Station One and Station Two. And he said this corner is a very steep gradient, and it's going to cause problems with vehicles. And the radius of this corner is 260 meters. Now, I can go around a corner in my car that's 50-meter radius at 45 miles per hour. So again, I don't know where he's pulling these numbers from. There's no kind of mathematical analysis of what's the fastest you can drive around the corner. And he's also not taken into consideration that the vehicles in the system will be high performance Tesla vehicles. The road will be completely dry 24/7, and it's perfectly lit. You've got four-wheel drive. It's just it doesn't make any sense to me
No
that he
potholes
would pick
either.
out these. Yeah, yeah,
It'd be a
it
perfect
just
road surface.
exactly. So you could probably go around that corner, maybe if you really, really wanted to be, a little bit dangerous, maybe even 80 miles an hour if you were coming into Station One. So it makes me laugh when he says things like this, that he just does not have a clue. He doesn't have a clue. He's an expert in chemistry. I'll give him that. He's got his PhD. Well done to him. He's a smart man. Unfortunately, smart people are sometimes very smart in one areas
Yeah.
and very dumb in other areas, and that's unfortunately the case with this guy.
Yeah, just really quick, I want to thank the Vasa Law Firm in Sweden, all my Patreon supporters. Will, you also have a Patreon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got so many patrons. I think I've got nearly 20 patrons now. They continue to support me, and thanks to everyone. Jishwen and Sebastian also support me on my Patreon, and I'm very, very thankful for the continuous donations. So thank you to everyone who donates to me as well. Really appreciate it.
If you go to Will's channel, he probably has a link to his Patreon. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's in my
On your
description.
videos? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so and I want to thank Cormac. Cormac gave a super chat and he said, "Hey guys, good to see you
Thanks so much.
too. Next transportation AEVs are an ideal collaboration. Will be on display at the Dubai Expo. I'm really pushing it for the Dublin Loop. Do you think there's some prospects for Boring Company loops in the UK and Ireland?"
Yeah. So I've spoke to Cormac about this a few times. He's a very nice chap, and I hopefully will eventually convince the board companies to come over to the UK. There's definitely the opportunity there. However, I think the opportunity at the moment is going to be in the USA, so they should definitely focus on that. Once they've got the 16-seater AEV and they've got a few systems up and running, definitely be pushing for them to come to hopefully Manchester or maybe Leeds or Liverpool or some other system that's in the north of England near me.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to mention there's something you had a video where you talked about people don't realize how much potential there is for Boring Company tunnels to help humanity in different ways. And one key point is you had this video where you talked about like a particular city that floods a lot. And you could run a
Yes.
tunnel from the upper portion of the river to the lower portion of the river that would divert water to reduce flooding in the city. Um, am I getting that right? What city was that?
Yes, that's Shrewsbury. That's near Birmingham, reasonably near Birmingham, and it does have a history of flooding. I've never had the privilege of going to Shrewsbury, but it's got unfortunately that one of in fact, the biggest river in the UK runs through that particular city, and it's a very very flat area, and it's got a lot of tributaries feeding into that particular river. So it's got its problems, but something like a tunnel would definitely help the city. Ultimately, it's going to move the flooding elsewhere. I accept that criticism, but I'd much rather 400 houses flood in this area than 50,000 houses in this area. I think that is a kind of a better solution. It's a lot cheaper than basically dredging rivers and doing other sorts of options. If you did like a cost benefit analysis, I'm pretty confident that the boring company would have the perfect solution for kind of diverting
Yeah.
rivers.
How long
Yeah.
was that tunnel in the Shrewsbury?
Good question.
That like 10 miles or 10 kilometers?
I think I just did it around the city centre, so I think it was about 2.5 miles. But you could definitely do it longer than that. I mean, if the money is there,
Because that's
uh,
nothing.
yeah, I
That's
mean
like,
that's
$15
nothing.
million to reduce flooding. That's a huge gain.
Absolutely. I mean, there might be another solution on top of that where you have a particular area of farmland which you just kind of designate as a flooding zone, and you basically when the rivers get very high, you force the water into that area.
Yeah.
The farmer takes a bit of money, his back pocket, and he says, "All right, that's fine. That area floods. No one, has damaged homes because a lot of homes in Shrewsbury can't get insurance, and they can't sell the house because no one wants to buy it because they know the flooding risk is too bad." So they're kind of stuck in this area basically. So that would be a good solution, and you could fund it whereby you get everyone to contribute to it, and then maybe they pay like a monthly fee or something like that. That would be well worth it for everyone there because then they could probably get insurance, which would be brilliant. But there's so many different potential use cases for the boring company system.
Right.
One that I'm pushing at the moment is district heating. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that's going to be a great opportunity. There was a Now You Know video, and they spoke to this startup in, I believe it was Finland or Estonia. And basically, what they do is they take electricity, convert it to hot air, and then store it in these sand pits. And then they can keep it in there for up to 6 months. And then you can take that, transfer it into water, and then send it to people's homes. I just think that's a great idea if you combine that with some other clean sources of energy. You could get rid of boilers in everyone's homes. One company could dig those tunnels. You've got access to service those that district heating network because they've got a lot of valves in these various systems, and obviously there's a lot of different connections. So there's various points where it could go wrong. So if you had access to that 24/7, you could repair things without having to dig up the road because a lot of these systems in Holland and other countries, Lithuania and places like that, they have basically have to dig up the entire road to get access to some of these pipes, and it's very expensive and troublesome. So there's lots of uses. I think one of the best use cases, which I really need to do a video on, is freight. I know you've talked about
Oh, yeah.
the Bering Strait.
Boring
I think
bearing.
that's a great idea. Yeah, I think that's possibly one of the best ideas out there at the moment. I think initially you start with a freight route, and once you've kind of secured that, maybe a couple of years later, you do the hyperloop after that. But there's many different use cases for the Boeing company. You could potentially do water distribution as well. So an area where there's lots of droughts, you could move water there from other places that get lots of water. We have that in the UK, where the north of England has excessive amounts of water, and then you have parts of the south of England where it's very very dry, and they need that water supply. So the number of use cases is almost as big as your imagination, and really hope maybe one day I might be able to speak to Elon Musk and suggest some of these things, but maybe he already knows them. Who knows?
He's got some pretty good ideas. So, I was doing I think it was a Clubhouse conversation this morning about because I've been talking about this all day. I'm sorry. I'm really excited about this news.
Yeah,
And I feel like people just don't grasp how important this, just for traffic, just talking about cars for a second, how important this is for humanity. Like, this is not just, okay, people in the Las Vegas Convention Center are going to be able to go from one end of the convention center to the other a few minutes quicker. This is using electric vehicles means you're polluting less. Doing it underground means if there was pollution, it would be underground, but there's basically no pollution. Noise pollution, when you think about if you do a bridge or you do a bus system or a lot of systems that you do, you're creating noise. And if the system is running underground, then you're eliminating noise. And this is something where, we're expecting 30 miles of tunnel in Las Vegas. I would not be surprised to see this expand to 100 miles of tunnel in Las Vegas, and then
yeah,
100 miles of tunnel on average for 1,000 cities around the world. So 100,000 miles of tunnel. And you can see all these cities where bridges get replaced by tunnels, and all that noise from the bridges is gone. And EVs replace vehicles and all that pollution from the gasoline vehicles is gone. All the pedestrians who get hit by cars. There's roughly 1 million people in the world a year killed by cars, and a large
Yeah.
percentage of those are pedestrians. There's no pedestrians in the tunnel. There are accidents where cars hit deer or, a moose or something like that. That happens particularly, upstate New York, where I'm from, the northeastern United States. You'll hit a large animal and the driver could be killed. Well, there's not going to be any deer in the tunnels, right? There's no pedestrians. There's no cross. The dangers of vehicle interaction with objects that aren't supposed to be in the roadway is basically gone. I'm not going to say nothing will ever happen. There will never be a deer that sneaks into the system. I suppose it could happen, but you'll see it. It's not like it's jumping out from the woods on the side of the road. The deer will be there, it'll be visible, and when you drive towards it, it's probably going to run the other way. So,
Yes.
and you're not going to see. I don't know if you know this story, Will. A girl that my daughter danced with in middle school was killed she was crossing a crosswalk on roller skates or a skateboard and was hit by a driver who just didn't see her. Like dusk, like bad lighting, whatever. I don't know whether it was his fault, whether it was her fault, but if that car had been in a tunnel, she wouldn't be dead. Really sweet. It's just one of those things that, I didn't know her that well. My daughter wasn't that close to her, but it really tugs the heartstrings when you see this, beautiful young girl who's killed by a car. And we can get away from that. We can get to that point where there's, and then I don't know if this happens in the UK. We have this thing in the United States since roughly 1950. We really went on a binge building highways. And we ended up dividing cities. We would run a highway right down the middle of a city, and we used to call it the wrong side of the tracks. If you run a railroad through a community, the people who lived on one side of the tracks tended to be poorer than the people on the other side of the tracks. You divide communities, you create separation, and if you all of a sudden put everything in tunnels, and you start eliminating roadways.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was watching a video that was criticizing the Boring Company today that Thunderfoot posted, and it was basically about this guided busway in Australia. And he was showing like an overview of this busway. And I looked at it, I thought, look how it goes through these communities and it just divides them in half. And you can't cross across from one place to the other. You have to walk up the road and then go across a bridge. And that's not ideal.
Right.
That's not, it's not doing any good for people. And look at all that land there. That land could be used for something else.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of criticism as well, where people say, "Hey, what about all the dust and the rubber from the tires? What's going to happen to that? Are people going to ingest that?" It's like, no, absolutely not. That's uh, the Model X has biohazard defense mode. I'm pretty sure that's going to filter it out. But if you really wanted to, you could filter it out in the ventilation shafts as well. Just remove that before it even gets to the surface.
Well,
So there's tons of solutions.
let me address that though. So first
Yeah.
of all, a lot of the reasons that we get those kind of things is because our road surfaces have significant imperfections. So the
Yeah.
tire encounters something that causes a piece of rubber to dislodge, a pothole, rough road. These are going to be smooth, low rolling resistance roads. They're going to be smooth. They're going to be low rolling resistance tires. I'm talking about I'm not talking about the immediate system, but in the long run, you're going to design these systems with roads and tires that are optimized for each other. So you're going to have less of that. You don't have diesel exhaust. You don't have gasoline exhaust. You're not producing CO2. You're not producing carbon monoxide. You're not producing other pollutants that come from an internal combustion engine. This is going to be much cleaner. And at the end of the day, between midnight and 6 a.m., when very few people are using the tunnel, if you need to, you could run a cleaning machine through.
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't even think of that. That's a great idea. Great idea.
There's so much people come up with. I don't know if you encounter this. People come up with so many ideas about why it won't work. So for those who don't know, I have a video on my channel, Boring Bearing. This is my Boring T-shirt, which is linked in the elonbits.com. But but I did this video where I talked about boring the Bering Strait, boring a tunnel basically from Los Angeles or San Diego up the west coast of North America, up through Alaska, through the Bering Strait, down through Russia into China, which I thought was a novel idea until I'd started doing my research and realized that the Chinese and the Russians have been talking about this for over 100 years. Not with a boring company, but they've been talking about tunneling or doing a bridge. So there's so much benefit to that. So and so but anyway, I proposed this idea and I get all these comments. Oh, earthquakes, volcanoes, like it's not like tunnels are new. Like Japan is in the Ring of Fire, right? They have tunnels all over Japan for the trains and the cars.
Yeah.
This idea that there's some sort of vulnerability to earth, and tunnels perform better in earthquakes than the roads, right? And what do you say about that?
Professional problem finders. That's the problem. They want to nitpick every single idea, but then when you ask them for a solution, there's nothing there.
No, and I ask
There's
them,
no other alternative. What would you propose that you could build here that would either do the same or do better? And it's like the mind is blank because there is no imagination to them. They have no imagination. They have no ideas. They have no engineering understanding. They're just
oh,
walking repeaters. That's all they do. They repeat other people's
yeah.
thoughts.
I have to
They don't
thank
have their
another
own.
Warren. There's another Warren in the chat, Warren Erickson, who says no more icy bridges and their corresponding signs. This is another thing we were talking about today was think about all the challenges we have with driving in bad weather, and in the tunnels the weather's always perfect.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
roads are never icy. It's never snowing. Your vehicle never gets ice on the windows. You probably don't need windshield wipers. You literally could, if you have vehicles that stay in the system. Like if you have vehicles coming from outside the system, that's different. But if you have these 12-passenger, 15-passenger vehicles that are running in the system that never leave, they're not even going to need windshield wipers. I mean, you probably won't need heating and cooling if you keep the tunnels at a set temperature. You might not need an HVAC system in vehicles that are dedicated for the tunnel.
Yeah, and that's a massive weight. Well, you can remove weight from the vehicles. You don't need to worry about airbags. You probably don't need seat belts. There's lots and lots of things that you can remove from a vehicle. That vehicle's then lighter. It's going to be quicker accelerating, and it's going to have more range. So all these things over time will be removed from the vehicle. And if it does stay in the system all the time, that's brilliant. Maybe sometimes it will leave the system, but you can add windscreen wipers, things like that. And in the future, there'll be so few accidents. You might be able to convince regulators that you don't need airbags and you don't need other things because the rate of accidents is so few and far between. I mean, that's for a long-term thing, but it's worth thinking about. And all these people that come out and say that the Boring Company system is never going to get close to its top speed, like 150 miles per hour. Maybe they've never been in a Tesla. Maybe they've never watched a video. It's going to happen at some point. I posted a video on my Twitter account about 2 or 3 days ago, and people are like blowing up about it. But that's going to be nothing compared to what we see in the next 2 to 3 years.
Are you talking about Jurvetson going 116 miles an hour?
Yeah. That's a good video. That one. He gets very excited about it. So we're going to see high-speed vehicles in tunnels. It's going to be extremely safe. Some of those vehicles are going to be platooning. You're not going to need to worry about them having to stop suddenly because there's not going to be any reason for them having to stop suddenly. And if they do develop a problem, then they're going to slowly, gradually stop. They're not just going to suddenly stop.
Yeah.
So it's possibly going to save, like you said, thousands and thousands of lives if they build it out at scale. I'm not going to say that the Boring Company is going to be interlinking every single city in the USA, but it's certainly going to be in the sort of medium to large cities, and robo taxis will take up the rest of the slack, as it were. So it's exciting. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for the future of this company. I'm excited for the future of this planet. I'm excited for Elon Musk. I think this is incredible. Steve Davis did a great job. I'm full of praise. It's been a great day today. I don't know about you, Warren, but I'm
riding high.
Literally, the first thing that I did this morning, I kind of woke up naturally, picked up my phone, and then I seen you tweet, and I was like, "This is going to be a good day. I know it's going to be a good day." It's like, "Hello, Steve Hill. What are you saying?"
Yeah. Who is this? Asks about train tracks. Why don't they use train tracks in boring tunnels? So I'm going to answer that. We'll see if Will has anything else to add to it. If you're going to have vehicles come from outside the system, if you only had vehicles staying internal to the system, that might make sense. I still don't think it makes sense because of the way they use the bays. But if you have vehicles like a robo-taxi is going to go to your house, pick you up, and bring you somewhere, you're not going to have rails all the way, and vehicles that aren't designed to ride on the rails won't work with that system. And he says because it would save wear and tear on the tires, and The wear on the tires is going to be very, very small. Think about this for a second. I expect that they will have tires that will last 100,000 miles, if not longer. I have 80,000 mile tires on my car. Okay, the Michelin's that are, I'm sure they won't really last 80,000 miles, but they're officially rated for 80,000 miles. It is very likely that they will use tires that last for 100,000 miles. Now imagine you've got, and they'll probably be inexpensive tires as well. They'll probably go down to 14 or 15-inch wheels that will use less expensive tires. My tires were like $400. If you go to, and I have larger wheels, so if you go down to smaller wheels and you buy them in volume like Tesla will or Boring Company will, you'll probably get down to $200 a tire, $200 a set, right?
Yeah.
So you put that over 100,000 miles, and you're talking about 2/10 of a cent, 2/10 of a penny a mile. That is not a significant expense. And I wouldn't be surprised if they get more than 100,000 miles if you have optimized low rolling resistance tires for an optimized road surface. You may very well get more than 100,000 miles out of the tires. Do you have any comment on train tracks or tire wear?
So I'm in fully agreement what you've just said then. So I think that with low rolling resistance tires, specific for the job, designed for electric vehicles, and also if you have like a very smooth kind of concrete road surface as well, you're going to notice a lot less wear and tear. And also the vehicles can be calibrated to ensure that the amount of wear and tear during accelerating and deaccelerating is kept to an absolute minimum. When it comes to trains and metros and things like that, look, I'm not against people building metro systems or tram systems or things like that. I just think that this solution is a lot better. And if people want to go out and build those kind of things, that's absolutely fine. But when it comes to rails, people just assume you put the rails down, then you run the trains on top, and it's all good. That is not the case. Things go wrong. Yeah, rails crack. The clips that hold the rails down, they move. Ballast moves. All sorts of things happen when you've got a very, very heavy object like a train running over the top, and you've got lots and lots of wear and tear as well,
And the
and that
wheels wear,
produces
right?
particles. Yeah, big time. If a lot of people don't realize, if you're in a train and say something happens and someone pulls, for example. I was on a tram in Manchester. When was this? About 5 years ago, and someone pulled the emergency cord. And what happened was the driver put his brakes on full whack, and it literally ground the wheels into a flat. When he restarted, you could hear it bumping every time the wheel rotated, and all those wheels had to be replaced, and it damaged the track. Things like that do happen. If that happens with a Boeing company autonomous electric vehicle, it slows down a lot quicker. It does zero damage to the car. It does zero damage to the roadway. Almost zero damage, and very minimal damage to the tires. Um, there's a lot of things that people don't talk about when it comes to trains. There are very high maintenance costs. I'm all for trains if people want to build those systems. It's great. If you're traveling more than 80, 90, 100 miles, definitely a train makes a lot of sense. Traveling less than that, I think that something like the Boeing company system is the winner. It's going to win every time on all metrics.
Okay, I'm getting questions about Proofrock. Somebody says they want an update on Proofrock, but somebody said Proofrock in Texas, just a rumor. There was an article that described a piece of property that the Boring Company acquired in a small town in Eastern California, sort of on the way from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, where they bought like 20 acres and they were tunneling. And I think it was Bloomberg TV, there was some criticism that they were getting tax breaks, or they weren't getting regulated as much, or whatever, they were taking advantage. Like, would you rather they tunnel in the middle of heavily populated Los Angeles? Boring Company's tunnel in Los Angeles is about 4 miles from my brother's home, really close to
Yeah.
Los Angeles International Airport, very densely populated area. They went out to the middle of nowhere with a town with a few thousand people, and they took a 20-acre property that used to be a dirt bike track, place where people ran dirt bikes, and they're just tunneling under the ground there. And so, as far as I know, Proofrock is being tested there in California. Have you heard of any updates on Proofrock, where it's being tested, where they are with it?
So they are testing Proofrock in Adelanto.
Adelanto,
It's
thank you.
in California. I'm not entirely sure how well they've been getting on with that. I have been keeping an eye on it closely. There are pictures of it, but we don't have kind of statistics as to how well it's doing. One of the things that Elon Musk tweeted, I think it was today, was Owen Sparks tweeted to Elon saying, "When beat the snail?"
When beats now.
And he,
When
yeah,
beats.
and Elon Musk said, "Sick burn. Hopefully next Yeah.
Oh
Like,
yeah, I didn't see that.
yeah, that he said. I don't know why he's saying sick burn, but I think he's saying hopefully next year, and I think he's referring to Proofrock in that. Because he obviously referring to the snail. I don't know where they're going to test that. I don't know if that's going to be tested at Adelanto, although if it's going to be tested in Las Vegas, possibly. I don't know.
Well,
Um,
let me throw out a theory here. The theory is that Proofrock is a pretty substantially different tunnel boring machine from Godot Plus, which is, for those who don't know, Godot Plus is the tunnel boring machine that has been working in Las Vegas so far. Proofrock is, in theory at least, going to be a much more efficient tunnel boring machine, cost less per mile, be able to do more miles per whatever time, more feet per day, more meters per day, hopefully more miles per week, something like that. Ideally, I think Will and I agree. If you got to a mile a week, it would be amazing. I think aspirationally they hope to do more than a mile a week. Um, but Proofrock, and one particular advantage of Proofrock over Godot is that Proofrock can, what is it called, porpoising? It can dive down and basically create the ramp down. Where currently with Godot, I think Godot you have to dig a pit and then start tunneling. Drop Godot into the pit to tunnel. How much sense am I making there, Will?
Yeah, you spot on, Warren. As always, absolutely spot on. So the problem with Godot is it uses traditional tunneling techniques. So to launch the machine, you're having to basically create a launch pit. Now, typically launch pits are fairly deep, so it's going to be around 30, maybe 40, sometimes even 50 foot deep. You either do that via sheet piling, and then you have some form of reinforcement in there, or you do CFA piles, so continuous flight auger. Basically, you drill a hole and then fill it full of concrete and rebar. Um, it, it's it's expensive. Now, I'm quite familiar with those techniques because I've worked in the industry and I've worked on various jobs doing that. If you can eliminate that process, not only are you building the ramp, but you're also getting rid of that expensive process, which I believe in Las Vegas for the launch pit at Station One was around $2.5 million, maybe slightly more than that. Um, so if you can get rid of that, that saves you a ton of money. Also, it allows you to get vehicles in and out of the system a lot quicker because what they had to do in Las Vegas was they actually had a crawler crane and they were picking up the spoil from inside the shaft, lifting it up, taking it to the surface, and then dropping it down in like an enclosure. And then a truck would come along and remove it from the enclosure. Well, you've got lots of unnecessary processes there. What you really want to happen is that a train goes in, with the muck and it comes out and then it takes it to where you need to go. So it's a much better system to use porpoising. Now, obviously, they're not going to be able to use porpoising absolutely everywhere because there are some implications at the surface where you might get some subsidence, but there are definitely a lot of places in Las Vegas where they could use it. So it potentially could save a ton of money. And it's that kind of consistent process of looking for savings, like they do at Tesla, but the Boring Company. Where can we save money? Can we save money here, 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 here? Over time, that results in a tunnel that costs less than $5 million per mile, potentially getting close to $4 million per mile. And that's how they do it. But yeah, you were spot on there, Warren.
Okay, really quick for people who are just tuning in. We started off with the big news that Steve Hill from Las Vegas Convention Center Authority announced that the Boring Company's loop system in Vegas for the convention center exceeded 4,400 passengers per hour. He tweeted that last night, this morning for me, or around midnight for me in Las Vegas here. Around midnight here in Vegas, it was last night, and a publication called Vital Vegas said that they estimated that it was actually delivering 7,000 people an hour. So there were critics of the Boring Company system who were saying they were only going to deliver 1,000 people an hour. Very, very harsh criticism from annoying people, particularly a guy named Thunderfoot, but not just him. Jalopnik was mocking it. I have an interview on my channel with Jason Torchinsky from Jalopnik. If you check my channel, search for Jason, you'll find that interview. And they don't know what the competing bids were. Like, let's talk about the competing bid. Can we just talk about that for a second? So
Yeah.
the Boring Company bid was $52 or $53 million for this system that would transport 40 4,400 people an hour, and eventually more people than that. There was a competing bid from a company called Doppelmayr that I believe it was like an elevated tram car system, and it was like $210 million, so 4 times as much money. Do you know more about the Doppelmayr bid? I think you know I requested the documents from the Las Vegas Convention Center, and they haven't given me an answer
Yeah.
yet. But do you know any more about that?
I know very, very little about that bid. All I know is that Doppelmayr have these kind of innovative kind of cable pulley systems for it's a little bit different from a train. It looks like a train, but it actually runs via cables that pull it along. So it's interesting, but obviously something like that is quite expensive. I'm sure it's an amazing system and it would work, very well, but it's a lot more expensive than what's being built in Vegas, or what has been built in Vegas. Um,
I think it would also be harder to extend it. Like the Boring Company
yeah,
plan is we're going to extend this, for 30 miles, and ultimately you're going to be able to, take a robo taxi or drive your Tesla into or your Tesla will be. I think plan is that only self-driving vehicles will be able to drive in the system. But
mm,
if you have a self-driving Tesla, you leave your house, you say, "Take me to downtown Vegas," and it uses the tunnel, and so that's not going to work with a Doppelmayr elevated tram system. That thing is not designed to scale the 30 miles of distance, right?
yeah, and remember as well, when they give you a price of $210 million, that's not the price.
Right.
That's the we're going to get you on the hook, and then we're going to pull you in, because it
Oh,
could end up being 250, 280, 300.
let me be clear about this. Boring Company delivered on time, on budget, under promised, over delivered. Did I get any of that
Yes.
wrong?
It couldn't be more correct. It's as far as I'm aware, it was around 50 million, and yeah, they finished on time. Someone who was messaging me saying that they finished late. It's not the case. They finished at the end of January. We've got to remember that we're in a pandemic here. They were doing very, very little construction work between January and sort of April. Literally nothing, just hanging signs, painting, and things like that. So, in my personal opinion, it finished at the end of January, and they've just got around to kind of having enough people to test it and getting enough vehicles to get it going. If this whole pandemic hadn't happened, they would have been running this at CES. So there you go.
Right. And then there's a convention that starts June 8th. I may actually go to this, Will. Um,
Oh, I'm jealous.
there's a
Well, the world of concrete.
there's a World of Concrete convention. So the deal is, I had bought an airline ticket to go to Oakland, California, for Tesla's going to have a Model S delivery event, a Model S Plaid delivery event on June 3rd, and I had requested to be able to attend, and I was waiting to hear. I actually heard back from a Tesla official saying he'd see what he could do. So he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. So I bought a refundable ticket. And Elon tweeted yesterday, I think, it's delayed a week. So I already canceled that ticket. And now it lines up with this World of Concrete event in Las Vegas. So now maybe I fly out to Vegas on the 8th. And my schedule's clearer too. Like my schedule was tight to make this event on June 3rd. So this actually works out great for me. So I fly out to Vegas. I spend a day at the World of Concrete event where I just ride around the tunnel. I don't care about concrete. And then
You should do.
and then I take
Interesting
it.
stuff.
I'll learn something about concrete while I'm there. And then I fly up to Oakland, California, or San Jose or something, and go to the Plaid. If I get in, I go to the Tesla event, and then I fly home. So this could be great for me. I'm really excited about this. Um, Philip asks, how much would it cost to drive through a tunnel?
Good question. What, in a city like Las Vegas? I suspect it would be around $10, maybe something in that kind of ballpark. I don't know what toll roads cost in USA. Like in the UK, it's getting close to 7, 8, £9. So yeah, I'd presume that they did do something similar. I don't know. They definitely make a good gross margin at those kind of numbers. But I've not heard anything in terms of driving, private cars through the system from the Boring Company yet, in terms of how much it would cost.
Yeah, they're not there yet. They have like fares for trips from point A to point B, like prospective
Mm.
fares, like from McCarran Airport to such and such a casino will be $5, or this trip will be $10. I think it works out to about $2. I think their fares work out to $2 or $3 a mile on the ride in the system. So I think if you were driving
Yeah.
your own vehicle in the system or riding in your own robotaxi in the system, I suspect the fares would be lower than using their vehicle. I would guess $1 a mile. To
Yeah,
guess.
I think it would depend on demand as well. That they might have some kind of algorithm where maybe during the peak hours it's more expensive than say at at night time. So when there's like literally no one using it, so that's definitely something they could introduce.
Yeah, that's we actually have that in Florida, Miami, Florida. We have these express lanes where
Yeah,
the sign
yeah,
literally tells you how much it will cost to use the express lanes, and
mm, mm.
the higher the price is, the more it's worth it. Because
Yeah,
if the price
yeah.
is high when the traffic is bad, so if you see 25 cents, you probably don't need to bother taking it. But then it's only 25 cents, so you might as well take it. And if you see like it's $7, I think it peaks at $7. If you see $7, you know it's worth it. If you see it's $7, you know if you don't take it, you're going to be stuck in traffic for an hour.
There's not actually that many toll roads in the UK. There was one around Birmingham, around the M6, I believe, and I only ever used it once. And everyone just drives like an absolute maniac on there. He's driving like 100 odd miles an hour.
Right.
I was going, I just thought to myself, you know what, this is brilliant. But unfortunately, they've now converted that into a standard public highway. So that's a great shame. But I think it's a good idea. I think they should definitely consider that as a revenue source in the future. Once FSD's been fixed up, then I'd definitely say that's a good one.
John asks, will the Model 3 in Las Vegas tunnel have slot machines? That's probably a silly question. I'm pretty sure the answer is no. You won't be in the vehicle long enough to use a slot machine. But I do think in the long run, robo taxis might have some kind of vending. Like if you're in a robo taxi or a vehicle like this, and you're going to be in there, like they might have a Coke machine built in, or they might have a coffee machine built in, it's a little trade off there. You don't want to make a mess in the vehicle and have to clean it up. So you'd have to balance, are we going to make money from this vending that's going to outweigh the cost of cleaning? I don't know if you have that's probably outside the scope of what you usually talk about, Will. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You could have like a virtual kind of blackjack table on the screen
Yeah.
as you're driving, and then you could get a bit of practice in. I mean, obviously, it wouldn't be like a actual gambling with real money, but it'd be kind of
Well,
fun if
Las
you could
Vegas, it would be.
lots of driving. Yeah.
Las Vegas, it would be real gambling, and you could probably have it built into the app that it bills you for the app for every pull of the slot machine. Or you can play you can play computerized blackjack.
Yeah, I mean, I don't gamble, so I don't have any comment on that.
No, but people
But
who are in
anyone else wants to
Vegas,
do, yeah.
people who are in Vegas do gamble, and I don't think it's likely that they would do that. Somebody else asked about putting ads in the tunnels. I don't think it's likely that Elon does not like advertising, so I don't see Elon going for that. I will say this. Let's talk about something related to this now. So I think you and I both see this tunnel system expanding uh, to 30 miles and possibly longer, and similar systems in other cities. I have this
Yeah.
vision. Okay, my vision. I want to be a Boring Company investor. Will and I have talked about trying to put together a fund that invests in the Boring Company. Um, I think the future for Boring Company isn't the current approach that they're using, which I think they will continue using for a while, is go to a city, get the city to pay you to build your tunnel system, get the city to pay you to manage the tunnel system. I think a much bigger idea is you go to a city and say, hey, we want to build a tunnel system for you at no cost to you. And when the system is done, we will pay you 10% of revenue for the system in perpetuity. And I have this image, they go to Cleveland and they say, hey, Cleveland, we want to do this. And the Cleveland politicians say no. And then they go to Cincinnati and the Cincinnati politicians say yes. These are two cities in Ohio for those who are not familiar with the United States. And everyone in Cleveland finds out that Cincinnati's got this system. And then they find out that their politicians voted against it. And then in theory, they vote in new politicians and Cleveland gets a system. Do you think that's a viable model?
I think it is. So I watched your video with Saxon Lee, and I thought that his models, although quite ambitious, were I think quite fairly correct. So I think that there's definitely a good business case for the Boeing company, say starting off with a 20-mile system, maybe a bit more, raising money via private finance. Once that system's up and running, maybe raising a bit more money to expand it, and then after that, the revenue from that system should basically pay for its expansion if you can get the ridership numbers, high. If they're correct when they say that Las Vegas can do 55,000 per hour, if you could get close to that, and everyone's paying, six, seven, eight, $9 a fare, you should be able to go to any bank in the USA or in the world and say, hey, look at this system. If I could expand it another 70, 80 miles, I could quadruple my turnover, and the bank should say, here,
Yeah.
take my money, here, take it. And like you've suggested, you could go to the local government and say, hey, if we build this system, all you need to do is support us. What we'll do is give you, a 6, 7% cut of every fare that we take in the system, and you can invest that in cycle lanes or public transport or whatever you want to invest it in.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good model. I think that's how it should be. I think the Boeing company should own its own systems, should own its own vehicles. It should collect the fares. It should have control. It should be 100% vertically integrated. It builds the system, it runs the system, it maintains the system. Every single aspect of that mass transit system is run by the Boeing company. No external parties necessary, and that would be a money earner. And you could be in a situation where you have, say, like a large system in Cincinnati, and once that is kind of almost expanded beyond the reaches of the city, you then say, "Hey, I've got all this money coming in. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Phoenix. Let's go to Boston. Let's,
Right.
any city you can imagine that has more than, say, 150,000 population. That will be viable for a Boeing company system. The scale might change a little bit, but that should be viable.
I just want
And
to know here the difference between Will and myself. I asked
yeah,
Will this question, and Will thought, okay, we can use the money we make from this. We can use the success of the system to go to a bank to expand the system. And I came up with what I was thinking was, no, we build the tunnels, we make money, we expand the system with the money we make, and we make more money. I'm thinking about how much money you can make on the system, and I
well,
agree with you. The goal is to expand it, but I don't know if you go to banks or you do a funding round or you do an IPO. Because you do an
yes, yeah,
IPO, because what Will and I dream of is an IPO for the Boring Company, where we're able to buy stock without having to go through some complicated venture capital fund, and they raise $10 billion in an
mm,
IPO, and we buy in however much we can afford to buy in, and then they just use that money to start building systems and making money. And my recollection of Saxon's analysis was 2 or 3 or 4 years into the system running, you've made your money back and you're making profits. And then
yeah,
the system lasts 50 years, 30 years, 50 years on, the cost of maintaining the system is not that high, and you're just making a ridiculous amount of money. And then that's the big idea then is, for me, it's you're making the money, now you expand the
mm,
system so that you can serve people better, you can make the world a better place, but you're also making more money. You're just
yeah,
massively growing the system. And I see it, they do an IPO with $10 billion and it values the company at 20 or 30, $50 billion or something, but it grows to a $1 trillion company. A $10 trillion company. I wouldn't be, I genuinely believe this could be a $10 trillion company. And especially if you look at Saxon's analysis and you figure all these miles and you do cargo tunnels and you do water
mm,
diversion tunnels and utility tunnels, and it's 100,000 miles of tunnel, maybe it's 1 million miles of tunnel. It's
yeah,
it's sort of
yeah.
like the sky's the. I was going to say the sky's the limit, but and that was a question. Sorry, there was a question much earlier about how deep can you go, and I think we should start with how deep do you need to go. I think you need to go at least, the tunnels are 14 foot in diameter that you bore. You need to go at least, let's say, 30 feet below the surface for your first tunnel, right?
Yeah, so like the crown of the tunnel will be 30 foot below the surface, and then the invert would be sort of like 45, around 44 foot below the surface.
And then you could go
But
deeper, and then
yeah, well, based on what they're saying. So I'm assuming that when Elon Musk is talking, or the Boeing company is talking about Las Vegas, they're talking about a dual bore system that is just one level, and they're achieving essentially 55,000 passengers per hour. How would you need 3 or 4 layers of tunnel in a city like Las Vegas? Probably not. There might be very, very few places where you would need that kind of extensive levels of tunnel. You probably wouldn't need to go more than ever. You probably wouldn't ever need to go more than sort of 250 meters deep. I mean, that is possible. The only issue that I've heard that kind of ironically holds water is um, what happens if you have a high water table and you're going very, very deep and the water pressure is very, very high. That theoretically could be an issue. There are like slurry TBMs that can operate, I believe, at about 9 to 10 bar pressure. You probably could get around close to 200 meters,
Okay.
but would you need to go that low? Most places don't have that kind of problem though. So you might um, run for a particular seam of or strata that is dry as a bone, and you're below the water table. So it very much depends on the location. You theoretically could go uh, a mile deep if you really wanted to, but would you need to go a mile deep? Probably not, unless you have some other use case other than mass transit. I don't know what that could be, but potentially there could be tunnels up to a mile deep if you really really wanted to do that.
Okay, I've got about 15 minutes left before I have to end this. So I want to ask an out there question. I don't know if you and I have talked about this before.
Go on.
Tunneling on Mars. So I think we've talked about the fact that you could deliver a tunnel boring machine to Mars. You probably would need more than one Starship to deliver the tunnel boring machine to Mars, but maybe.
Yeah.
And once you got a tunnel boring machine to Mars, if you had the electricity to power it, you could bore tunnels on Mars, and that could be a very good thing for people on Mars because of the radiation on the surface. What are your general thoughts on boring company doing tunnels on Mars?
So it's great. I've actually been working on a video with To the Future, which is covering this exact topic. Although we're actually, I think, initially looking at the moon, but the kind of processes are basically the same. So the initial problem is getting the boring machine to the planet. Once you've got over that, it's fairly easy. The fact that there's lower gravity really does help you a lot, and the fact that you can just dump that spoil on the surface somewhere means you don't need to do anything with it. So that again, that's a bonus, and it's definitely viable.
That's a new
Um,
T-shirt, Litter Mars.
yeah, listen, Mars, I love it. So another thing that might be beneficial as well is because that actual cutter head is lighter on Mars or the moon than it is on Earth, you theoretically could spin it faster, so you could have a higher RPM, which might even enable you to tunnel faster on other planets than that have less gravity than the Earth. So it's definitely doable. You just have to supply the parts and the material. It won't require any labor. You could have essentially like an autonomous TBM that you might only need one person to run it. Essentially, you could have the spoil removal and the tunnel lining assembly all automated. If you could do that, that would be very, very useful. Not only could you find and extract minerals, you could also create, underground cities as well. Your main reason of doing it, though, would be to move people in between settlements and to move resources in between,
Well,
like colonies and settlements.
isn't there an advantage being in a tunnel in that you're safer from radiation? And actually,
Yes.
a quick
Yeah.
question about the moon versus Mars. The moon gets a lot more sunlight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your
Absolutely.
your energy production for solar panels on the moon would probably generate a lot more electricity to power the TBM than panels on Mars. I mean, I think I'm right about that.
Yeah, yeah. So you could definitely get like a better efficiency from those solar panels on the moon. I think when I looked at this, I think I kind of concluded that the best solution for Mars or even the moon might be some kind of a small modular reactor, something like that, and you could basically put that to one side while you're using the solar panels as well. So you've got like excess energy, but it's all very doable. I don't see any kind of holes in the argument that you can't bore tunnels on other planets. One issue is the lining of the tunnel. You might have to move to a steel lining or even another metal like aluminium, which obviously is a lot lighter, which would make it a lot easier to move from Earth to the moon. But you would hope that on Mars you would find resources to build the lining, hopefully iron ore, and then you'd have basically a large supply there to
Well,
do.
why wouldn't you
To
just do concrete segments for the so people understand this? As I understand it, the current boring company tunnels are shored up. The lining of the tunnel, which holds the tunnel stable, is concrete segments. I think you've talked about hexagonal segments, and they're made of concrete. Is concrete difficult to produce on Mars or the moon?
Yeah, there's not the resources there. So basically, concrete is cement, which is powdered limestone, and then you'd need specific types of aggregate. So you want fine and coarse aggregate and sand as well, and some water. So you've got a lot of components there that you need to combine in the right quantities. Another thing that's a major problem with concrete that people don't realize is it takes 28 days to cure generally. We say 28 days, but usually we load up structures after 20 days or sometimes even less than that. But that curing process continues for a very, very, very long time. And that is sucking oxygen and other things out of the air.
Which
If you
doesn't
had
exist on Mars.
exactly, but if you then converted that space into, say, accommodation or storeroom or some kind of factory, you're constantly going to be losing air into that concrete. So it has problems. I think that having metal kind of segments is the solution. I think that would work better. I think that you'd find iron on the moon and Mars. It's not easy, but you'd find it a lot easier than all the other components you need to make the concrete. Um, and that curing process potentially as well could take a lot longer on other planets. So you might end up having to, stand by your machine while that's curing off, which then is losing your time, and you don't want that. There's better solutions, I think, than concrete on other um, other planets like Mars and the Moon. In my opinion, when I've ran the numbers. And because the gravity is less, that lining doesn't necessarily need to be as thick. It reduce the diameter of the tunnel as well, and still end up with the same internal diameter. So that's great.
Kevin suggests we use bendy buses on Mars. So if you have
Well,
for people in the chat, if you have questions, fire your questions away. I've got 10 minutes left before I have to go, and
yeah.
Oh, John Yent asked this question: what about boring under the Bering Strait? How deep, John? If you watch my video on it, it's not very deep. It's I think it was maybe less than 100 meters that you would have to go.
Yeah, I think it's like 65 meters deep. So you'd probably end up having to go around 100 meters in total for your overburden. Yeah.
But if you just Google Bering Strait depth, you'll get a number, and you need to go probably at least 30 feet or 10 meters below that, and a little more is probably a little better. So I'm just seeing if there's any other questions in the chat I wanted to address, because you and I got going on Mars for a while there, and I probably missed something. So
it's a good question. Good question.
So somebody said about going a mile deep. I think I'll just, since I don't see anything with the boring bearing idea, I saw something about tunneling in the permafrost, that there are sections of the permafrost where there's some sort of geological problem where it goes deep. Do you know anything about that?
It's a very, very, very good question. Permafrost is a difficult situation for construction. And permafrost can be very, very deep as well. So, in terms of going through that, that could be problematic. You might want to go below that, but you might not have the option of doing that, which could be quite a difficult one. But there's always a solution for a problem. There might be.
There's always a solution. Yes.
Yeah. There's
Matt,
always a solution. Just I'm not able to think of it yet. But I think if you go deep enough in permafrost, you're not going to have the problem of it thawing out. And there might be something you can do that prevents it from thawing out if you're like 40, 50 meters deep. And then it'd be fine. It might even be good because it'd be easy to dig through.
Right.
And you don't need to worry about subsidence because essentially the ground is frozen. Um,
Yeah, what I
but
what
I
I
mean,
read was that it's mostly not that deep. It's mostly 5-10 meters deep or less. But there's certain spots where the permafrost goes very deep. But let me turn to a different topic. Matt Burns asks, when will the strip loop be tunneled? Do you have a rough idea of when Vegas's 30 miles will be done? You know, what's the rough timeline for all 30 miles of the current Vegas proposal?
all 30 miles is again, it's a very good question, but I I don't know how many TBMs they're going to throw at that. Um, it'd be interesting to kind of calculate how much they could potentially do if they had 30 miles. That's 609 meters. We've got 48,270 meters. If they did that with one machine that could do 150 meters per day, which is getting close to what they potentially should be able to do, that'd be 321 days. You want to get that down really. So four machines, uh, five machines. You could, if you could have four or five machines, maybe more than that, you could maybe do it in under 5, 6 months.
Right. So it's just getting the go ahead, basically. If they get the
Yeah,
go ahead,
what might happen though is it might take it. The tunneling might not be the problem. The tunnels might be completed quickly,
it's the
but then you have
stations.
all the stations. Yeah, so the stations is more kind of what I can visualize it because I've built things like that before. But the stations potentially could overrun. You know, if you're going underneath an existing casino or adjacent to existing casino, you might have existing foundations. How are you going to work around those foundations? You know, there's all kinds of little bits and pieces that could go wrong. But you could essentially open the system with 10 stations and then as you go along add the other stations and then interconnect it. So it could theoretically be done in under a year. I think that's possible, but it's very difficult to say without knowing how many TBMs the Boeing company are going to throw at it. At the moment, I don't think they have like 5 or 6 TBMs. I think they only have two. So they need to get building basically. That's why they need the TBM Gigafactory. They need some kind of facility where they can ramp out these things, or at least ramp it out for a period of the year and then close it down. Um,
Yep.
the more TBMs they can throw it, the quicker they can build it. But then on a construction job, you have a thing called a critical path. So you're following that path from one end to the other, and in that path are various different elements of construction, and you have to do A before you do B, and then you have to do C after you've done B. So y- you you need the stations to finish um, before you've kind of interconnected your tunnels to them. So that could be the struggle in doing this project. But it's difficult to say. Really, a station is just essentially a chamber underground. It might be above ground. If they put them above ground, that might improve the speed of the job. So it depends how they all get built. I've not seen designs of all the stations, how complex they could be. I think it could be done under a year with enough TBMs and with good planning.
Okay.
That's my answer.
All right. So I'm running out of time. So
Cool.
let's do one more. Paul asks, what differentiates? Well, really quick, I just want to mention Jim Whitehead suggested that in rural parts of Alaska and permafrost, it might make sense to use tubes on the top rather than if there's a particular area where it's difficult to bore tunnels and there's no population, it might make sense to do some kind of tube above ground rather than a tube
Yeah.
underground. I'm not sure about that. I don't have a strong opinion. I think it's a good idea. Paul asks, what differentiates a boring company tunnel machine from other tunnel machines? Is not the way he worded it, and I'll take my stab at it. One, the tunnels are narrower. They're 14 feet diameter instead of 30 feet diameter, which means you have to do a quarter of the work. Two,
Mm.
what they're working on making them fully electric, which means that they don't have exhaust in the tunnel, which means you don't have to ventilate the tunnel while you're doing the boring. 3, they're working on making it so that the tunnel boring machines can tunnel more hours of the day. So, for example, you're tunneling and you want to get the spoil, the stuff that you dig out of the ground when you're boring. You've got to remove that. If you can make that process work faster, you can keep tunneling. And you have to put concrete segments up as you're boring the tunnel. You got to put concrete segments up to shore up the tunnel walls. And I think some tunnel boring machines, they actually have to back out the machine in order to do a lot of this. And the idea is so that if you never have to back out the TBM, tunnel boring machine, TBM, then you're able to work more quickly and get more done. Am I close? Will, because Will knows more about this than I do. Will, what would you say?
That's fairly close. Like the boring company, Proofrock TBM, it is designed with continuous mining at the heart of its design. So it's designed that it's always doing the kind of 3 critical elements at the same time. So it's assembling the tunnel lining, it's removing spoil, and it's also cutting away rock from the excavation chamber. So it's doing all those 3 things at the same time, and it's doing them an equal rate. So it's not like catching up on itself. If it can do all those 3 things, and I think Proofrock will do that, then that enables it to go much, much faster. Because the problem at the moment with current TBMs is essentially they're working kind of in sequence. So they're assembling the tunnel lining, then they're thrusting forward from the tunnel lining, and at that time they're cutting the excavation. And then sometimes what happens is they have too much spoil coming through on the screw conveyor, so then they have to stop the machine while they remove it by the muck trucks or the muck trains, and a lot of things are out of sync. So you're having to wait for this to happen, then you start this, and then you wait for that, and that is how it's always been. And it's just not the most efficient way of building a tunnel, but it's what has worked in the past, so that's what they stick with doing. A lot of time I get these questions where people say, "Hey, if these companies that build these TBMs, if they're not doing it now, then maybe they can't do it." Well, the reason they're not doing it is because they are the next IBM, they are the next BlackBerry, they're the next Blockbusters. They they just want to keep doing what they currently do, and they make lots of money doing what they do now, so they don't need to change. That is the reason. And if they really, really wanted to change, uh, there's not the person there leading the team that can actually make that happen.
Okay.
So it's that's my spin on it. But the Boring Company TBMs are going to be something very, very special when Proofrock is released. Hopefully, if what Elon Musk said today is correct, then we will hopefully see it by the end of next year, which would be incredible.
Cool. So I got to wrap up. I want to thank Will. Please check the description and the video description. You can see a link to Will's channel. It's the Boring Revolution channel. He makes great videos about this. Really quick, a couple of people who came up with this. John Bay said that the 3rd generation of TBM should be named escargot because this goes at a snail's pace. And John Bay, he said S-cargo. So I might tweet that to Elon, or you should tweet that to Elon, that the future TBM should be called escargot train. Especially one that's designed for doing tunnels for cargo. So thanks everyone for watching this video. Check out the t-shirts, elonbits.com. Support this channel on Patreon. Support Will's channel on Patreon.
Thank you.
Go to his channel and you can find his Patreon and his video descriptions. And thank you so much for watching. I'm going to end the stream, and Will, I'll talk to you before we're done. Thanks everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you everyone. Goodbye.